Today's subject is a man whose songs painted the American West in golden light, whose voice turned mountains into hymns, and whose smile was as much a part of 1970s radio as static and soul. John Denver. He was the troubadour of open skies and quiet hopes, the folk country icon who made millions believe that love, nature, and a simple life could still be sacred. With his wire-rimmed glasses and gentle twang, he wasn't built for scandal or headlines, but for something purer: connection. He sang of West Virginia, the Rocky Mountains, and sunshine on his shoulders. But his deepest lyrics were about home, belonging, and the people we hold on to when fame fades. While the world embraced him as the voice of Americana, few knew the quiet chapters of his life: the adoption papers, the bedtime routines, the long drives to school in between, sold-out tours. John Denver didn't become a father in the glare of cameras, but in the slow, deliberate way a man builds a life beyond the stage. He raised 3 children, Zachary, Anna Kate, and Jessie Bell, in the echoes of platinum records and private heartbreaks. And though his marriage unraveled and his own flaws followed him into the cockpit of a doomed plane, he never stopped trying to be the man his songs promised. He was imperfect, idealistic, and deeply human, a father who gave his kids more than fame or fortune. He gave them a name sung by millions, and a love grounded in something quieter than applause. This is the story of John Denver and what happened to the 3 children of America's folk. Poet Zachary, John Denver. He entered the Denver household not long after the summer of 1974. The same year, Back Home Again soared to the top of the charts and made John Denver a household name. Zachary John Denver, just a toddler then, was adopted by John and Annie Martell in the early years of their marriage. After a long period of emotional strain that included fertility struggles, long-distance separations, and the unrelenting pace of John's music career. For John, holding Zachary in his arms was a grounding moment, a real-life counterbalance to the mythical persona forming around him. The media labeled John the golden boy of American folk, but in Aspen, Colorado, he was just learning to be a dad, changing diapers between songwriting sessions and humming lullabies that would later become million-dollar hits. In 1975, when Annie's song reached 1 on Billboard, it was written not just for Annie, but for the life they were building, a life that now included Zachary toddling around in a wood-paneled cabin tucked in the mountains, unaware that his father's voice was becoming the national anthem of domestic tranquility. As Zachary grew into the late 1970s, the duality of his world became more apparent. At home, his days were filled with skiing, horseback riding, and quiet walks through the Rockies with his dad. John had deliberately moved the family to Aspen to avoid the chaos of Los Angeles. But when John went on tour, Zachary was left behind, and the absences began to leave marks. By 1982, the year John and Annie divorced, Zachary was around 8 or 9 years old. He was old enough to understand that something was broken, even if the grown-ups around him tried to cushion the reality. The custody was settled amicably, and both parents shared time. But the split ended the family unit he had always known. It also marked the beginning of John's slow, personal, unraveling legal disputes, failed relationships, and drinking problems, all unfolding under national scrutiny. While Zachary entered adolescence quietly, deliberately removed from the circus. Through the 1980s, Zachary attended high school in Colorado, always described by peers as reserved, polite, and fiercely independent. He rarely talked about his dad. Even though classmates sometimes asked for autographs or stories, he enrolled in college in the early 1990s, studying public policy with a focus on environmental law, a quiet echo of his father's passion for nature. Unlike Jessie, his younger half-sister who would later pursue art, Zachary never chased public attention. He stayed behind the scenes, working in nonprofits and later dabbling in local politics. When John Denver died tragically in a 1997 plane crash off the coast of California, Zachary was in his early 20s. The call came suddenly, the kind that ends one life and changes another forever. While fans flooded the airwaves with tributes in Rocky Mountain High played on loop, Zachary flew to handle funeral arrangements, deal with the estate, and comfort his younger sisters. The spotlight turned briefly toward him, and for the first time, his name appeared in newspapers, not as John's son, but as a stakeholder in the legacy. But legacy comes with baggage. In the years following John's death, disputes emerged about the direction of the Windstar Foundation, the environmental nonprofit John had founded in the 70s. Some accused Zachary of being absent, of not protecting his father's vision. Others within the organization defended him, saying he had always preferred privacy and had simply chosen not to exploit his father's fame. When Windstar was eventually dissolved in the 2010s and the Aspen property sold, critics resurfaced again. Zachary remained silent, issuing no public statements. Friends said he grieved in private, visiting his father's old writing cabin alone during winters, never accompanied by press. He married quietly in the early 2000s, raising a small family in Colorado, far from LA and Nashville. Unlike many children of celebrities, Zachary never leveraged his surname for profit. He refused interviews, declined memoir offers, and turned down podcast appearances that wanted the untold story of Denver's son. But those who knew him said he didn't need to speak. His life was a kind of quiet protest, a refusal to become a character in someone else's nostalgia. Today, Zachary John Denver is in his late 40s. He's not active on social media. His name appears in old alumni directories, in the footnotes of Denver biographies, and sometimes in foundation records linked to clean energy causes. Occasionally, he attends a tribute concert or lends his name to a scholarship, but always in the background. He has watched the myth of John Denver grow his induction into the Songwriters Hall of Fame, the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, and the continuing sales of reissued vinyl. He has seen his father's image turned into murals, his lyrics printed on bumper stickers, his voice used in commercials, and he has said nothing. But for those who understand how grief mutates into memory, that silence speaks louder than any interview. Zachary was the first child to know John Denver, not as a legend, but as a man who burned toast, hugged tightly, and sang lullabies before bed. And in his quiet life, far from arenas and fanfare, Zachary honors him still. Anna Kate Denver. She arrived as quietly as her brother, adopted into the Denver family during the mid-1970s, when John and Annie Martell were still holding on to the hope that love, fame, and family could all coexist. Anna Kate Denver was John's second child, and like Zachary, she came not through birth, but through choice, a deliberate act of building family in the middle of stardom. From the start, Anna Kate was her father's soft spot, while Zachary mirrored John's seriousness and introspection. Anna was the spark, curious, bright-eyed, and deeply attached to her father's gentler side. In Aspen, she grew up under snow-capped roofs and in the company of music legends. But her parents tried hard to keep the stage at arm's length. There were no reality shows, no red carpets, just family hikes, garden picnics, and quiet dinners where John would hum unfinished melodies and ask what they sounded like to her. By the late 1970s, as John's fame crested with hits like Thank God I'm a Country Boy and Calypso, Anna Kate was a toddler watching her dad walk in and out of airports and arenas not as a star, but as the man who made pancakes in the morning and always returned with souvenirs in his suitcase. When John and Annie divorced in 1982, Anna Kate was still a young child, barely in elementary school. The split was public and bitter, and for the children, it introduced a new reality: dual homes, missed birthdays, and whispered arguments behind closed doors. For Anna, the separation was more than emotional. It was spiritual. She became quieter, more withdrawn, retreating into books and animals. Two things that felt permanent in a world that suddenly wasn't. John tried to stay close. He wrote her letters from tour, called her before every show, and spent long stretches with the kids in Aspen. But the 1980s were chaotic. His second marriage failed, his DUIs made headlines, and his once pristine image fractured. Anna Kate, now a teenager, began to understand the cost of fame, not from red carpets, but from watching her father's pain become public entertainment. She attended a private high school in Colorado, keeping her last name discreet and often going by just Anna to avoid the weight of the Denver legacy. While some classmates gushed about her dad's music, she learned to smile politely and change the subject. It wasn't shame, it was preservation. By the 1990s, Anna Kate had moved east for college, enrolling at Dartmouth, where she studied environmental policy, a quiet tribute to her father's Windstar Foundation. Unlike Zachary, who engaged in public service and quietly dabbled in politics, Anna preferred the academic route. She wrote papers on sustainable farming, volunteered for climate NGOs, and turned down every media request connected to her father. When John died in 1997, she was in her early 20s, just a few years into her adult life. The news came like a punch: a routine solo flight, a sudden crash, a global outpouring of grief. And somewhere inside it, a daughter trying to grieve a father the world believed belonged to them. Anna Kate did not speak at the funeral. She did not give interviews. She disappeared into the folds of private mourning, surrounded by family and friends who understood that the louder the world cried, the quieter she needed to become. In the 2000s, Anna Kate married a man named Jaime Hutter, a financial consultant with similar roots in the mountains of Wyoming. The couple relocated to New Zealand, far from the legacy of American celebrity and the echoes of her father's music there. She built a life of deliberate anonymity: no public social media, no press statements, no appearances at John Denver tribute shows. She gave birth to a daughter, making John Denver a grandfather posthumously. To outsiders, her disappearance puzzled many. Some fans speculated she was estranged from the Denver estate. Others believed she had rejected her father's legacy. But those closest to her said the opposite was true. Anna Kate had built her life in a way her father never could: grounded, stable, untouched by the storms of fame. She managed John's legacy in the only way that made sense to her, by preserving the part that was just hers. Today, Anna Kate Denver remains one of the most elusive figures in the orbit of American folk royalty. She is never seen in documentaries. Her name appears only in quiet legal records and family foundations. But her influence is felt in the preservation of her father's quieter values: his environmental work, his love for rural life, his devotion to family despite personal chaos. While the world remembers John Denver for Sunshine on My Shoulders, Anna remembers the man who taught her how to plant trees and asked for her opinion on lyrics. And in that private memory, far from platinum records and public myths, his legacy remains intact, not in song, but in silence. Celebd Denver. She was the only child John Denver ever held as his own by blood. Born in May 1989, during the brief but turbulent marriage between John and his second wife, Cassandra Delaney, an Australian actress and singer, Celebd Denver arrived late in her father's life. He was already 45, no longer the chart-topping sensation of the 70s, but a man struggling to redefine himself through second chances. Her early years were spent between two worlds: the quiet, forested edges of Aspen and the scattered film sets of her mother's career. John, long since divorced from the smooth image of the folk hero, poured himself into fatherhood with Jessie in ways he never could during his meteoric rise. He was aging, his fame dimming, his personal life marked by legal troubles and fading health. But for Jessie, he was simply dad: gentle, present, and always humming something under his breath. Photographs from that time show her on his shoulders at music festivals, her hand in his during public walks, and nestled beside him in candid family portraits that rarely made it to magazines. He adored her, but time was short. By the time Jessie turned 8, her father was gone. The 1997 plane crash off the coast of California shattered whatever stability had been left in her young world. Her mother moved her to Australia for a while, where they tried to disappear from the flood of public grief and media fixation. Jessie didn't attend the televised tributes. She didn't stand beside politicians praising her father's environmentalism. She grieved quietly, watching the myth of John Denver swell larger than the man she remembered. As she grew into adolescence during the early 2000s, Jessie faced what neither Zachary nor Anna Kate had: the burden of being John Denver's only biological heir. Every fan letter, every producer chasing a documentary, every article digging into the Denver estate had her name on it. But Jessie rejected the narrative of inherited fame. Instead, she turned to art painting, mixed media, and later jewelry design. She enrolled at art school in California, and while she occasionally referenced her father in interviews, it was always brief, always on her terms. In her 20s, Jessie Bell moved back to Colorado, choosing the very mountains her father had once written into legend. But she didn't return to relive his past. She returned to rewrite her own. She launched her own art career, showing pieces in small galleries, selling handmade jewelry, and creating a life built not on nostalgia but on expression. She married in 2019 at the Denver family home in Aspen, the same property that had once echoed with her father's laughter and lyrics. It was a quiet ceremony with only close friends and family. No press coverage, no spectacle. Jessie has never been a celebrity, and that's by design. She occasionally speaks at environmental events, and her work often reflects nature and memory, but she has remained fiercely protective of her privacy. While fans continue to post old videos of John singing with his baby girl in his lap, Jessie remains mostly absent from the conversation. No memoir, no behind-the-scenes expose. Just a daughter quietly living a life that honors the man without worshiping the myth. Yet she has not been spared from the drama surrounding her father's estate. After WinStar Foundation folded, questions resurfaced about who was responsible for losing John Denver's environmental legacy. Jess's name, along with Zachary and Anna's, appeared in legal records regarding the sale of Aspen properties and rights to certain unreleased recordings. Though none of the children ever made public accusations against each other, estate watchers speculated about divisions, disagreements, and financial gaps. Jessie never commented. She didn't attend WinStar's final auction. She didn't try to revive her father's foundation. And to many, that silence became symbolic not of neglect, but of exhaustion. She had lived with the Denver name her entire life. If she chose to keep her memories personal, that was her right today. Jessie Bell Denver is in her mid-30s. She lives quietly in Colorado, still working as an artist, occasionally spotted at tribute concerts or charity events connected to her father. But she remains the most mysterious and in many ways the most emotionally complex of John's children. She grew up with the myth baked into her identity, shaped by love but shadowed by loss. And while the world clings to the image of John Denver as America's folk saint, Jessie remembers the man behind the music, older, more fragile, and deeply human. Through her art and her silence, she keeps his memory alive, not in lyrics, but in lines and color, in the things left unsaid. 3 children, none born into the spotlight, all pulled into it by a last name that echoed across radio waves and mountain valleys. They each carried a piece of John Denver, the softness, the solitude, the burden, and together, without fanfare, they preserved the quiet parts he never sang about. His legacy gave them a name. His love gave them something deeper, a reason to live beyond it. If this breakdown moved you and you want more untold stories behind the legends of American music and film, subscribe to Hidden Heirs. Your support keeps the spotlight on the lives that fame left behind. Thanks for listening.